The United States experienced a series of conflicts and events leading up to the Apollo 11 mission. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the US competed not only in politics, but also in technology, as each side attempted to prove the superiority of its country through the space race.
The space race was seen as not only a battle for technological and military firepower superiority, but also part of the prevalent competition between communist and capitalist governments. It represented Cold War tensions. The USSR's launching of the first satellite into space, Sputnik, in October of 1957 began the fierce competition between the Soviet Union and the US in the space arena. Americans worried that their communist enemies were ahead of them in taking the first step toward space exploration. Following the launching of Sputnik, the United States attempted to launch its own satellite, but it failed miserably and was coined as Flopnik.
The space race was a reflection of the Cold War conflict that had originated as a battle over the spread of communism and political dominance. These two countries viewed the space race as an opportunity to prove their technological and political superiority. The United States worried that if the Soviet Union had rockets powerful enough to launch a satellite, then they probably had rockets powerful enough to launch an atomic bomb.
On November 3, 1957, the USSR carried the first passenger into space, which was a dog named Laika. This finally motivated the United States government to take action and put resources into a space technology program.
In 1958, Eisenhower created NASA, a federal agency dedicated to space exploration. By 1964, NASA spending had increased by 500%, which created thousands of new jobs for American citizens. After the creation of NASA, the Soviet Union sent 2 more dogs into space, and the United States retaliated by sending a chimpanzee.
The Soviet Union sent the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into orbit in 1961. As tensions rose and the American government became more involved in the space race, John Kennedy made a bold public statement in his "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech by stressing the importance of efforts to put the first man on the moon.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. We shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
This created even more competition between the US and the Soviet Union and involved the American public, as national media also became involved in covering the space race.
The United States took another step towards placing a man on the moon by creating the Apollo program, which was the third human spaceflight program carried out by NASA, and launching Apollo 8 on December 21, 1968. Apollo 8 became the first manned spacecraft to reach Earth's orbit, reach the moon, orbit it, and return safely to Earth. Its crew was made up of Frank F. Borman, James A. Lovell, and William A. Anders.
Finally, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 was launched, and 4 days later, man took its first steps on the moon and ended the space race with the Soviet Union. The Apollo 11 crew was made up of Neil Alden Armstrong, the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Collins, the command module pilot, and Colonel Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr., the lunar module pilot.
Okay, I'm on the top step. It's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next. You've got 3 more steps and then a long one. Okay, I'm going to leave that 1 foot up there and both hands down about the 4th rung up. There you go. Okay, now I think I'll do the same. A little more. Not another inch. There, you got it? That's a good step. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation. There is very, very fine powder, isn't there? Isn't that fine? Hey, Neil, didn't I say we might see some purple rocks? Find the purple rocks? Yep. Very small, sparkly fragments.
The mission was a success. The astronauts were able to land and place an American flag on the moon before returning safely home.
The Apollo 11 mission was significant not only politically but also technologically. The Apollo Guidance Computer, or AGC, was the main guiding tool used in Apollo 11 and used a real-time operating system, which enabled astronauts to enter simple commands by typing in pairs of nouns and verbs to control the spacecraft. Experts cite the AGC as a fundamental to the evolution of the integrated circuit. It is regarded as the first embedded computer. Many of the things we use today are technologies that were developed for the Apollo 11 mission. For example, earbuds, memory foam, flame-resistant clothing, cooling suits, fluid recycling, exercise equipment, reflective materials, freeze-dried food, and scratch-resistant lenses. The Apollo program also led to the development of pool purifiers, seismology machines, solar panels, heart monitors, and cordless technology. The technology contained in a Game Boy exceeds all the power that was used to put a man on the moon. The technology that was used during the 60s for this mission is astounding to present-day scientists due to all the restraints they faced. The success of Apollo 11 was a feat in the technological arena and proved America's superiority over the Soviet Union.
Apollo 11 was the largest non-military technological endeavor ever undertaken by the United States, with only the Manhattan Project being comparable in a wartime setting. In fact, Apollo 11 was the height of the Apollo program. After the space race ended and competition subsided, the pressure to continue the space program and further develop NASA lessened. There were a few more attempts for space exploration, but no major breakthroughs, and one in particular ended in disaster.
On January 28, 1986, a space shuttle called the Challenger broke apart during takeoff. All 7 of its crew members died, and the result was a 32-month halt in the shuttle program. Eventually, NASA's space shuttle program ended after the landing of Atlantis, its last shuttle, in 2011.
157 feet per second, altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
It's always amazing to hear how quickly the shuttle moves. It's already more than 4 miles downwind as we
Engine throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
This shuttle mission will launch, my God,
1 minute 15
There's been an explosion.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
This is not standard. This is not something that is planned, of course. I can see a solid rocket booster has broken away from Shuttle Challenger. That's what you're looking at in the middle of your screen. I cannot see the shuttle itself. I don't know if it's able to continue on one rocket booster. If it's able to jettison that rocket booster, it will be able to return to the Kennedy Space Center. Perhaps. The shuttle engines are not enough to power the shuttle back down. It would have to shut
You're
down.
looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Politically, Apollo 11 led to the resolution of the space race, established foreign dominance, and set the stage to ease tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The mission proved that a capitalist government could be just as effective as a communist government.
The famous handshake in space took place in 1975 when an Apollo spacecraft carrying a crew of 3 docked with a Russian Soyuz spacecraft with a crew of 2. This represented a more positive relationship between the two former spaceflight rivals, and was a result of the Apollo program's collaboration with Russian astronauts, eventually paving the way for future international partnerships.
On the home front, the Apollo 11 mission reunified a nation split by the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. As a result of the mission, high schools added more math and science classes to their curriculums. The event itself received an abundance of national media coverage, and the first step on the moon was highly televised and watched by the public throughout America.
Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over. Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene. That's all right, I don't mind a bit. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Beautiful, just beautiful. How is the quality of the TV? Oh, it's beautiful, Mike, it really is.
Apollo 11 was one of the biggest steps in America's efforts to rebuild the confidence in the United States' scientific and militaristic abilities. As they returned home, American astronauts were honored as heroes.
Outside of ending the space race and proving technological and political superiority, the Apollo 11 mission proved what the human race is capable of achieving. As Neil Armstrong stated upon landing on the moon,